mau toti ham ya khu hikium pora patah make hunim aku tam pora make hunim moni pora hosima ba manes yamas maun hunin yamas ke make yoklera konayo ite urai kwera ya yai waro bihium ki hein yar kaman hosim te thake wai hotas man brai baru kumam ki rere suma kem yar
It's funny because you're in the middle of nowhere and you have nothing. You can scream all you want, no one will hear you. I remember one day we were saying, "What now? What are we going to do? We're trapped here in a dead end. There's nowhere to go. What are we gonna do?" Then Milton got philosophical. "No, we must go down. Let's fix this boat and go down." I said, "Milton, I'm not going down there. Didn't you see what happened downstream? Go down? Really? When you get into something like a rapid or a waterfall, that's when you really die. It's from here up. I'm going up. I'm not going down." The Indians, who were of little support at that point, they had stayed way up there. It was no use screaming or doing anything else. No one could really hear us. We were far below.
Bill, the pilot, flew to the region a few days after they started the trip. I don't remember which runway it was, but he wanted to go to the region they were going up. Fly over the region. He flew over trying to see if he could find them or see them, and he didn't.
The labyrinth is so big that when you look down on it, you look at everything. You're looking around everywhere. You can't focus on just one branch of the river. So if you're not visible, there's no fire or anything, you'll not be seen. That's what happened. We were very frustrated. I said, "Oh, there's a plane!" There was nothing we could do.
We knew it was a very difficult trip because of the rapids. There are almost 80 kilometers of rapids. They don't stop. We were going to start with a small engine. The 15 horsepower, which was what we had. The boat was very heavy, with 4 passengers, and everything we needed to survive. All the food, weapons, clothes, bows, arrows, lots of things. Chainsaws, axes, all the things we needed for a trip like that. You start to take stock of your own life in terms of who you really are, your arrogance. In our case, on that very journey, we knew the jungle because we had lived there for 10 years. Everything we knew that had gone down the drain, and there was nothing left. We had to sleep in the middle of the jungle. We had nothing. Now the problems begin. A lot of people live like that. You can't go up or down. You don't have emotional and physical strength anymore. The situation is completely out of the human perspective. God works. As life is fragile as it is, like a mist, like it is said in the Bible, when you begin to think, you're walking and you're bitten by a snake. The snake injects just a little bit of venom in your huge body and you're gone. You walk down the street, you're perfectly healthy, you can fall and hit your head and die.
Kama filme atai pihio you tu koroham eis kamyash kahwash yama kanawa yama mure mostu pemyar
tema
mostu pemyar na
ai yar ka papi mohut mai bora
I don't know if it was because of the trauma from that whole situation, and I'm not even trying to justify it because it was a surprise for me too. Instead of thinking about surviving and getting out of it, I start thinking about things, and that gets very difficult. I start thinking about the family, parents. No one will ever find our bodies here. How is a funeral without a body? I've read my whole life. I've always loved reading. I read everything that fell in front of me. I read about the great Chesterton expeditions. I read Tom Sawyer, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. When you read this book, you will see that they are lost on an island and come back to watch their own funeral. It is a very famous book by Mark Twain. Yeah, it wasn't any fun. It was no fun at all. I kept thinking about how my father, my brother, Marcia, Timoto, Tiana would react at my funeral. That was an unexpected reaction for me.
I don't know if Milchinyu got into a tailspin, but he wondered a lot. He thought a lot about death. What is going to happen now? I said, okay, Milchinyu, so what? We might die, and if we die, we die. What can I do? There's nothing we can do. It was going to be a funeral without a body, but he kept thinking about it. What's it going to be like? I don't know, Milchinyu. What do I know about a funeral without a body? Let them worry about it.
Those years we spent in the jungle, I didn't worry at all, because Milchinyu had full knowledge about that place. He went out with the Indians, fished, piloted the outboard motor very well. He knew the forest. He was very prepared. I wholeheartedly trusted him. Whether we needed a lighter boat, and he told me the whole thing about it, why they used that boat. Everything was very natural to me. Until, if I'm not mistaken, on Wednesday, they called me into the office to tell me that the Indians had arrived in Paramiu, that the boat had capsized, bent, sunk, or whatever. I don't remember the story the Indians told about the boat, and that both had disappeared in the water, and that they thought that Curt and Milchinyu had died. Then I asked, "Did you see the bodies?" He said, "No." After a while, one of them, I don't remember which one, came and said, "Do you understand that they might be dead?" I said, "I understand, but nobody found the body, right?"
Some side, Deus anã, wakalade, toda soma buma, toda soma buma, toda soma buma, toda soma buma. Some side, Deus anã, wakalade, toda soma buma, toda soma buma, toda soma buma.
I came here on an internship, and I liked it a lot. On April 17th, 1980, we came here. I was 25. Marcia was 23. We had already been married for a year, and we weren't worried about it because it was something that we were prepared for through courses, internships. We already knew what was going to happen. We were thrilled with the new things. Everything was so different. First, a language that we didn't understand at all. The way people dressed, the environment, the sound of the forest, the night. Everything was new for us, like when you're in a different country. It all looked very interesting. What is that? I wanted to learn whenever we heard a noise, during the conversations. When people talked and they talked and we understood absolutely nothing, what they wanted. Everything they said seemed important. What did he say? What is this? Also, when it came to what we were going to eat, how to clean the curacao, the wild turkey, a guan, how to eat a pacabelly, clean a pig, things that logically we had never done. But we didn't have big problems because it was a path. Like I said before, I reached my goal. I got where I was able because I had been preparing myself for so many years. I left so much behind to be able to be where I was going. I came home. This is where I wanted to stay. That was the beginning to the story, all these years. There were many years learning the language, learning a lot about the culture. There were good years. Our children were born, and we really missed those years we spent in the jungle. When I arrived, one of the things that was very interesting was that, in those years, contact with outsiders was still very limited. In an indigenous society, you have a kinship line, and that is very important. When Marcia and I arrived, we were adopted by a family. I had a mother, I had brothers. I still have brothers. The woman said, "You will be my son." Uni was her name. She had several children. They called me brother. They treated me like a brother, and they were always there for me. There was another lady too who said, "You are going to be my son." I was a part of her family too. I had two mothers, which is typical in this culture because they have a family system called extended family. And there you can ask how many mothers you have.
When you go into an environment like this, which is completely different from yours, you are the learner. You're the one who has to learn from them because you don't understand anything. If they leave you in the jungle, you get lost and die. They own the truth of the forest of everything. They know from end to end how things work in nature. It's incredible. So you have to go, willing to learn, never to teach.
Hey, filme atai bihim yaro, betul simunim. Dia 14 com yaro. Dia 13 a mãe bihil carro maca.
Que eu mo.
Tire hey. Hey, hui. A mãe bihil. Nata.
Na teia tá na
dia 13. 13. Com 13 com a rato mahita.
But a cross-cultural context like that is very interesting. For example, our children grew up in that context, so the experience they have is sensational. It's out of this world. For them, wherever they are, they're fine because they know how to live in another much simpler context, in the middle of the forest, and they liked it. Even today, when they come here to visit us, they say, "Dad, can I go to the jungle?" From time to time, David comes and performs dental work in the village. When Larissa comes, she also says, "Dad, can I go to the jungle with you?" She already took one of my grandsons, and soon she will take the other one too. They have this cross-cultural experience that is very positive, and many people don't have that privilege. There's people from Sci-Fi who provide health care. In the past, only missionaries carried out all the treatments, vaccines, etc. Today, that's Sci-Fi's job. We are now focused on the educational part. We start to teach them how to read and write in their native language. We give them handouts, everything in the Yanomami language. Only later, we give them the transition booklet and they start to learn Portuguese. This is to emphasize the appreciation of their own language first. They learn to read and write in their own language as well.
Sanakaya, 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 Sanakaya.
The trip was unfamiliar to us, but as we already knew the jungle, I always say this. We knew how to make camp using leaves. We knew how to shoot. We knew how to fish. We knew all that. We were with the native people. We could make fire. We had taken easy to prepare food. We had honey. We had a lot of things for if it was a week trip or a 10-day trip, we wouldn't have a problem. Our logistics were good. It was supported by 2 indigenous people who also knew everything. And we had several years of experience in the jungle. We knew all the dangers and all that stuff. In the adventure aspect, there was also an aspect of ignorance. Courage is very relative in a case like this. One of the things we did not foresee is we had a lot of experience with wooden boats. And the wooden boats, which we used before, are much heavier. But they are also much more stable. The aluminum boat is fast, but it is not as stable. It's very edgy.
So we decided, I don't know how, but let's get an aluminum boat. At that time, 30, almost 40 years ago, it was very difficult. It was very difficult because here in Boa Vista, there were no aluminum boats to buy. Today you can find any type, size, and color. And we managed to get a boat from Mojin Mirim. It came chartered, arrived in Boa Vista, but it wasn't the proper boat either. It had to be that boat they called voadeira, because it stays higher on the surface of the water. The one we got was a cargo boat. It carried more, but settled more on the water and was slower. That's the one we bought. And we bought the wrong one that was riveted. It wasn't even welded, because the ones that are used today are welded and stronger, which is much better. The rivet one is much weaker. Then, when this boat arrived here in Boa Vista, we had no choice but to say, now we have to take it to the village. How are we going to take it? By airplane? It's not going to work. We could perhaps get into the Air Force's Buffalo and take it all the way up to Aguaris. But Aguaris goes far beyond the post from where we live. Then we would have to bring the boat back with a lot of waterfalls and everything. We decided, let's go up the river. We set everything up, all the necessary material, fuel, tools, food, and we take 2 indigenous people with us. We prepared everything for our trip, which would be a feat. Right on the first day, or it didn't even take a day, we started to sense what we were going to face. Because it was a river with a lot of rapids, there were times when we had to stop. 2 or 3 people had to go down on top of a rock, and then we had to go through the other side because the engine didn't have enough power to pass. I'm talking about rapids here. Imagine when the rapids or the waterfalls are huge. No way. We already started to see this trip is going to be challenging. We kept going after all, we were young at the time, with an adventurous spirit, and so we were saying, let's go. It is not a straight river or one that has curves, but it gets wide, so it is a very different and very bumpy river. We knew we were going to face some challenges ahead.
There was no other way. We had to choose the smaller branches of the river, and we had no idea where we were. We didn't know because we always opted for smaller branches with fewer rapids or weaker rapids, so we could keep going up the river. We did not know where we were, whether we were too far to the left, to the right of the main branch, if there was a main branch, because that was the option. We were going up. We kept going up without knowing where we were. But as we went up, we realized that we had passed the point of no return. There was no way to go back. As we went up and past waterfalls, some of them were big. We had to take the boat out. We knew we couldn't go down any further because when you're going up the river, you can still control the engine. You can stop. You can look where you're going. You can go back. You can even go in reverse. We knew that the only way now was to go forward. And we were getting more scared because the rapids didn't end. We would pass one, and soon after there was another, and another, and another, and another. And sometimes taking the boat out, passing through the woods, and we were scared because we couldn't give up on the trip. We had to keep going.
I remember that when we arrived, we initially worked hard to learn the language and the culture, so we decided not to have children for practically 2 years, so we could adapt ourselves to the place and learn the language in the best possible way. We were very careful to do things as best as possible. There are people who learn the language faster than others, but it's a very complex language, and it has many onomatopoeic sounds, and sometimes the sound they make is even funny. They come and take the arrow and then... Ka-chow! So, ka-chow means that the arrow really penetrated. It has all these sounds. I always say, I'm going to die learning this language because there's a lot to learn. It's no use to look it up in the dictionary. You have to create your own dictionary. It is complicated. It's no use even going to Google. I type there, what is this? Google won't tell you anything because it's a language that hasn't been described ipsis literis yet.
Missionary, ropai. Rupit. Alô? Dia pesman. Helicóptero. Missionary. Por espaço. Oh, ara capsaço. Vitina quei. 10. Oh. Missionary, ropai. É bonito. Adam do tem mahi na ya no mamo até voltar. Tá waro uma mahi, tá waro uma cua. Monita cua mi. Wa bisku no mai. Ipa uri hama huta. Waram huta. Yaro waro. A cua mahi. Na yaro wai se mi. Wai se mahi a cua. Aí wai se mahi ki.
It's beautiful. They say, wow, Curt, you speak Yanomami so well. It's not that I speak well, but the more you imitate, the closer you get to them. Even if you can't really speak the language, I try to imitate by making little jokes. They say, wow, this guy is one of ours. That's not true. I still have a lot to learn.
Curt is sui generis. Sometimes I tell him that he doesn't suit himself. I say, "Bah, you don't suit yourself," because Curt is a very... Let me see how I can define Curt. Curt is a very God-fearing man that doesn't have... I mean, he's a very intimate relationship with God. He prays a lot, and I have to learn more of that from him. I am very much like I pray when I'm walking, when I'm driving, when I'm at work. I pray a lot like that, but he stops, prays until early morning. So before he goes to sleep, he puts his 2 pillows on the floor and kneels. He is this man of prayer. This is something that is a rule in his life, understand. I think that's what sustains him. So when I tell people that he doesn't suit himself, because he's very grumpy, but he doesn't mean it. He complains about everything. And I say, stop, ba. He's a curmudgeon. He was born a curmudgeon. But he's very funny. He's very happy. That's why he doesn't suit himself, because he has this grumpy side. And I think that, I don't know why, he just likes to be against everything. But he's very happy. He is incredible. And his love for the indigenous people too. He is very happy. He is very happy with his ministry. He is very happy with his family. He is a very happy guy. I think that he is a little too happy and silly sometimes. I'm much more serious. Curt ends up being very funny, and it's too much for me because I'm much more serious. But we get along very well. There's a balance.
Some side, some side, some side. Deus anã, wakalade. Toda soma buma, toda soma buma, toda soma buma, toda soma buma. Some side, Deus ana.
Aí, pois. Aí.
They have more knowledge than we do, and we only have more knowledge in areas like technology and medicine, which they don't have access to. And if you were on your own, you would die in a place like that. How did they survive all these years, living the way they do? There is a similarity. Of course, we overvalue technological knowledge, but if you stop to think about it, we can't even make a map. Your personal knowledge is based on a technology that came through college, companies, secrets. But if you go back to the basics, you don't know how to make fire. They do. You're living in a society that has provided these things through centuries of trial and error. But if that all ended and you came back, how would you make fire? I had colleagues in the village who allowed me to study, at least for a while, and I enjoyed it a lot, and I went out a lot, and I like to do that. I did it with pleasure. It was like this. Almost every Saturday I went out, and by the time I went out, I regretted it bitterly. Because they go walking through the woods all day, literally the whole day. I was in excellent physical shape, but when you start walking, you warm up. You walk and walk and walk, and you don't see anything. People think that going into the woods is like going to a supermarket. You pick something here, something else there, grab a banana, kill an animal, and go back home with the cart ready. Many times you don't see anything. The people get hungry for meat. They call it naki, which means to get hungry for meat. They didn't find game. I went out. Sometimes when I went out, they had found something. Someone had heard the noise of pigs or seen the footprints. We would go with more certainty. But I remember leaving early. By 6 a.m. I would be walking. I would walk the whole day and come home at the end of the day. That part was interesting because when we stopped, we would talk, and then I would learn the language. That part helped me a lot too in my relationship and the vocabulary for that kind of walks, hunting. To this day, we all know, if I find a feather on the ground, I know from which bird it was. I can get one or another wrong, but I know a feather of a toucan, a macaw, a curassow, a jaguar. You learn these things. What animal is singing? What bird you're seeing? Something very cool about learning their language is when you call an agouti or locate the pigs. They listen to the noise. The pig does, they heard it from far away. So they took it, stopped, and they always took two types of arrows. An arrowhead for a large animal, which is like a knife. So you can have an idea, and an arrow for birds, which is quite different. They would leave the arrows for birds and only take 2 or 3 tipped arrows, which is called roca. Think of a knife, only it was made of very strong bamboo. And then we could go on top of the pigs. Then it got crazy. There was a rush. They would kill several of them. It was far away. They would disappear. I would always stick with one of them and go after them with a shotgun and usually kill one or two or even more. Then we stopped and they went back to where the arrows were, where they had left things. I used to go crazy about it because it's all the same. You have no idea how they have such a sense of direction. It still amazes me to this day. These things seem so strange. You'll see that behind all that, there's a common feeling, and that's very interesting. Look at it, any other culture today, no matter how non-Western or how different it may be, you will see the same human characteristics that we all have. Love for children, scolding them. When you look at it, there is no difference at all. When you understand, you live together and you admire. You really appreciate what is common to all of us. The joys, the pains, the abundance of food, a good hunt with a lot of pork, a lot of joy that this brings. The same thing if you go to a Rodizio steakhouse. It's just the same thing. You understand this part. And we already knew this from the beginning. But when you really process it, for example, I sometimes go to Kasai, a hospital unit there, and what does a guy feel? He misses home, he wants to go back, same thing. I remember I was talking to my brother-in-law, a Kobe, and I was already speaking the language well, and I was looking for word longing. We think that longing is something exclusive to the Portuguese language or the Latin languages, especially Portuguese. It surely doesn't exist in English. You will say, I miss you, or something else, but the feeling is the same. It's not that we feel more because our word is better. I was talking to a Kobe. I said, I was looking for the word longing. Let's see if they have it, I said. Sometimes you think of when you were little, what your father was like. I was saying a lot of things trying to find that word. He listened and turned to me and said the following, funny white people feel that too. I couldn't find the word, but he said the same thing I was looking for. He was astonished. You also think like that. We use the word saudade, and saudade really is a spectacular word in our language. Joy, sadness, feelings, and many things common to all peoples. This is difficult to teach, or for a surrounding society to understand, because there's always this idea. No, he is an Indian. He doesn't understand or know anything. He doesn't have anything. He's worthless. That is a very bad understanding. There are still many here in Boa Vista who think like that. They say, they're just occupying land. And then there's the political line that I won't even talk about. There's gold digger invasions. It's a horror what has been happening today. We continued for 2 more days without major incidents, but we were scared because the rapids didn't end. We were going up, I reckon, maybe 62 miles of just river. What was the problem? You passed a rapid, sailed maybe 5-10 minutes, Then you saw water in front of you. And it was a big discouragement. You'd get there, see if you could pass. If not, we'd unload the boat, pass everything by the side, taking the boat out, and continuing.
As we climbed operating that vine, the boat docked and started to return. It came back and got a good hold of that thick vine, and it turned over with the force of the water. And it turned over, and everything that was in the boat went down, including us. And Milton just said to the Indians, "Take the machete and jump." One of them grabbed the machete and they jumped onto the bank. I saw Milchinu downriver going down among the other things that were floating. Other things had already gone to the bottom of the river. The boat capsized and then began to descend. I also threw myself into the water and went down. In the middle of things, we went deep down. The Indians then stayed on top and went straight to the bank.
When the boat capsized, I entered the water and I was pulled right into the current and got out into a whirlpool. The only thing I had time to grab, which is what was within reach, were 2 oars. I sank with these oars because I got into a whirlpool of water. It pulled me down with the 2 oars, and they were cedar oars. They float. They give you a certain buoyancy. I sank and I went very deep. Everything went dark. I just remember the darkness, my ear hurting. I don't know how deep I was, and I was going down. I can swim. I was in good physical shape, despite being tired, but there was nothing I could do. Then begins the first direct intervention of God because I said a prayer. In fact, it was a cry, "God save me." Immediately, I went up, as if the whirlpool started to do the opposite. Instead of pulling me to the surface of the water, I was floating. I saw Curt way down on top of the boat, and I swam toward Curt, but everything has sunk. We could see the boxes floating away. We had wooden boxes with food, with matches, with a stove, with everything we needed, and it was sinking. It's not scary. Drowning is a very bad feeling, which is what was happening to me. When I said this prayer, in fact, it was a cry for help. And I went up. The time I went up, the feeling was not just of relief. It was having gone through a trauma there. The time that I sank, it was more of a physical reaction than an emotional one of fear. Now we are really lost. Now our situation is going to be very serious. But you just keep doing something. We put the boat on the bank and sat down for a while, looked at the whole situation, and it was very serious because our 2 traveling companions stayed far upriver. And we put the boat there and we went up to try and find them. But we couldn't because there were so many branches and so many islands that we could not move on to the next island, and they couldn't get down either. And we stayed far away thinking about that mile, and that's conservative. They tried to find us, and we tried to find them.
The boat was really crumpled. It looked like a U. You couldn't even see it was a boat anymore. When we turned around, the engine was still attached, and it still had the gas tank. The tank was still attached to the hose, so it was all providential so that we wouldn't be left with nothing. There was no alternative but to stay there. There was nowhere to go, and we were very tired, exhausted from that rapid we went through. We had no choice. We had to stay there. There was nowhere to go. We had to fix the few things we had. Opened the bag I had, opened everything. Some things were wet. Then I did a silly thing and put these clothes on top of a rock on the edge of the river to dry. But during the night, the river rose so much that in the next day, there weren't any clothes left. Everything was gone. The little things I had were gone. Everything starts to come into your mind. What now? What's going to happen? Those thoughts are always there. Our family members, what will they think? How long are we going to be here? Will we ever get out of here? What is God trying to teach us with this? Milton thought about death. He was very worried about how his funeral would be with no body. I said, Milton, forget about it. There's a chance we might die. It's a possibility. But I kept thinking, what is God's purpose in taking our lives in that context? What now? No food, no material for survival, machete. If we had a machete, we could cut hearts of palm to eat. We looked for something to eat, but the jungle was just really scarce. It wasn't fruit season either. There was nothing. We looked for some root. There was nothing. So we could only drink water. Whenever we got hungry, we filled our bellies with water, but it didn't kill our hunger. It just alleviated hunger. We spent 3 days in this routine. We started to get really weak. And I heard a noise in the wood, cha, cha, cha. When I looked, I saw an alligator. It was this big. I said to Milton, an alligator. Let's catch this alligator and eat it. And then he said, okay. I said, I'll take the front and you take the back. You grab a stick and I'll take the front. I said, I'll take the front and you take the back, and you grab a stick and I'll take the front and we'll mess with it to distract it. No sooner said than done. Bam! Hit him hard. Sure enough, that's what happened. I took the front very slowly, feeling my way, and he took the back. The alligator stayed by my side looking at me. Then it raised its little head like this and did. When he did this, Milton came from behind and hit it. Bam! We killed it with a stick. Then came the problem. There was no fire, no knife. How do you open a hard skin like that? I just remember that we grabbed its tail because the tail is all full of stuff. We'd break off that little piece, then we would have a few pieces of meat. We took it and ate it. We couldn't kill the hunger. We ended up not being able to use the alligator to satisfy our hunger. We knew that death was one of the possibilities because what were you going to do in the middle of the jungle with nothing? Without fire, without a machete, without being able to do anything to survive, we had nothing. It really was a chaotic situation. And we were facing death because we said, humanly speaking, there's no way out of here. How are we going to get out of here now? Broken boat? I don't know if it will work again. No food. It's a matter of time, I think, for us to die. Our salvation is still that we have the boat. The broken boat. The engine is still there. There is some fuel left in the tank, and the best thing to do is to dig into it and try to find a way to get it working again. But then comes Milchinu and says, no use. There are no tools. I've never seen Milchinu like that, so close in these difficult times, because Milchinu was a very relaxed guy, nice to talk to. But when the difficulties came, he just got depressed.
You start making an assessment of your own life in relation to who you really are, your arrogance. And Ike, on that very trip of 10 years of experience living in the jungle, everything that had gone down the drain, and there was nothing left. You start thinking about many of your own mistakes too. It's hard to explain it, but it's a suffering situation, and you make new resolutions. That came from this experience of human fragility in relation to life, emotions, feelings. I've always been a person who has high pain threshold. I always thought about how I would react in a situation like that. I learned a lot from that experience, and it has been with me since that time. I may be in a situation right now of great acknowledgement. Yeah, some things like that have happened occasionally, but I say, remember who you really are. That was in those days of suffering, a kind of depression. You won't get out of here. It is even in Curt's way.
The jungle, especially the Amazon jungle, for me, is impressive. It is exuberant. It is fascinating. It opens your eyes because it is such an immense thing, so diverse. There are trees of all types, size and color with those vines and whatever. You say, wow, what a beautiful thing. It has a big impact. But apart from being such a beautiful, exuberant, and fantastic place, it's a place that scares you. It gives you a certain fear, a dread, because this very jungle can also swallow you up. And it's not just the large animals, like jaguars and other animals, but let's say mosquitoes, ants, termites, snakes. These smaller insects, they can crush you. It can make you fall into such a depression, and you can even die because of small insects. And if you don't know how to get out of that context, the jungle will, swallow you alive. For the indigenous people, it's easy. The jungle is their home. If you are with an indigenous person, you are at home with him. He takes a leaf, then he weaves it and makes something to carry things. He goes there, takes the vine, does something for this or that, rips off some bark from the trees, and makes a net. For him, it's the backyard of his house. But if you leave the trail for a little bit, you get lost. You look everywhere. Everything is the same. Everything is green. You only see the woods, the trees, and you get lost without realizing. And there's nowhere to run. I sat down with Milcinu. We talked and I said, Milcinu, do I think there's a chance we might die? Yes, it's one of those possibilities. But I believe that God has a purpose for our lives, and one of the purposes is for Him to work in our lives. Let's stop here, let's sit down and talk, and let's clear everything up with God. There are many things here that we do determinedly, and God is completely out of the picture. That's it. We're living on the sidelines with no purpose. We're doing things in the name of the gospel of Jesus. But Jesus is out of our routine here, of our day to day. It is God trying to teach us how to rely on Him. We were doing things just for the sake of it, with God out of the way, thinking we were the ones. Let's confess our sins. With regard to our colleagues at the Post and everything that we did, the steps we took too, let's ask for forgiveness. What else can we do? We were like, let me see. If I can remember anything else that I have to get right with God because I acknowledge that I am living a life relying more on myself than on God. And there it was. We confessed our sins. We looked at each other's faces, we seemed to see a little halo, and we felt so holy. Lord, if you want to take me now, I'm at peace. And, there it was. We confessed our sins, and we looked at each other's faces, we seemed to see a little halo, and we felt so holy. Lord, if you want to take me now, I'm at peace. I've already confessed everything. I've already acknowledged that I'm no good, that I do everything putting you aside. So if I have a chance to get out of here, I'll start to straighten up more and put you in charge of my life. You have to take the lead, and I will just follow.
Our strengths, what we are nothing. When you face some situations, you see strengths, weaknesses, and you realize what I always insist on, humanity. Prayer is a two-way street. You speak, you ask, and you talk, and God listens. And God answers as He sees fit. If you only look at your side and you forget about grace and that God is listening to you, that He is your Father, you get into this problem because it doesn't only depend on your faith. That was what was happening. Deep down, I was like, I don't deserve to be saved. I know so much. I practice so little. I felt insufficient, incapable, and that I deserved to be in that situation of when you pray, you say, oh my goodness, I can't even ask you to do something like that because that's what I mean. You look at yourself and you forget to look at God. It's like a son that goes to his father and says, Dad, I know you're not going to do this because I did this, I did that, I did the other thing, I disobeyed. But can you buy me a... Then he asks for what he wants. That was the feeling. But we prayed anyway. When we were pulling the engine cord, the prayer was specific. God, let this engine start. We would even say the model of the engine. It was a prayer that we showed our total reliance on God, like all prayers. And we believed there's going to be an answer. Something spiritual. No, God will do it. God will look after me like He promised. That part was out. This part is very important because we pray based on the promises. Whenever you ask in my name, knock and it will be open to you. Seek and you will find. Whatever you ask in my name, according to my will. That was the imbalance in that situation. You look at yourself and if you say, God will listen to me because I am, and then you complete it with adjectives, you won't find many. I am such an excellent person. I am selfless. I pray a lot. I evangelize. I do this. I do that. You won't find anything that meets the standards. It's even silly to say this. I pray a lot. But the Bible says, pray without ceasing. How much do we pray? If it says pray without ceasing, I'm out of line.
For me, it was like this. Our salvation was in the boat and the outboard motor, even though it was all filled with water and etc. There weren't any tools left, so we couldn't open the engine. We couldn't even pull the engine rope because there was water inside. In the carburetor, the internal part, the spark plugs, everything was filled with water. When we tried to pull the rope, it didn't move. It was stuck. When I left the outboard all night with it upside down trying to get the water out, the next day when I pulled the rope, I realized the rope was free. I pulled it. The rope came out, so just water coming out everywhere. When I pulled it, the thing would go, I told Milchinu, the rope is free. He kept saying, yeah, but it's no use. It's full of water in there. Stay on the hammock and I'll work there. I'll see what I can do with the engine. Nah, there's no point. I would go back there, then I would come up with ideas. I took that part of the outboard motor that regulates the height and went to Milchinu. I said, Milchinu, look here. This here could be a key that we can use to remove the spark plugs. Let's try to bend it. I don't know how. Let's see here. Let's take the spark plug, open it, and that's it. We've got the engine almost dry, releasing the water that's inside the spark plugs. We would pick it up. This is not going to work. That made me angry. I'm not going to ask the guy for his opinion anymore because he's unbelievable. I put the engine back in, then I started pulling. Boom, boom. Nothing happened. I said, Milchinu, could you pull it? He said, it's no use. There's water inside the spark plugs. I said, okay, but let's pull it here. He said, it won't work. I said, Milchinu, stay on the hammock, pray, and I'll work here. Okay? Okay. And so we did. He prayed while I was working. And I kept pulling. And I pumped gasoline to fill it in. And then suddenly, when I pulled it out, it did this. When Milchinu saw what happened, he jumped from the hammock very happy. Man, did you see that? I said, of course I saw it. It worked, right? Now you'll come, right? We were so exhausted. Now it worked. Okay, done.
All of a sudden, the engine goes, and it dies again. But it was a miracle. It was great to see the engine starting up again. Then we were in a new phase with the possibility of the engine working again.
The Uruguay River is a relatively large river, so it wouldn't be very difficult to find a boat on most of the Uruguay River. But they had the accident in a region where it splits into many, many branches, hundreds of branches, and there's this huge amount of islands and branches. So that would make it extremely difficult to find a person. The region they stayed after the accident, where they had the boat and the engine and where they camped until they managed to get the engine working, was a place where they would hardly be seen by someone on a plane. At that time of year, in July, the river's really full, so there isn't a dry place to stay by the river. It's very difficult to find a place where you can stay dry and where you can be seen by a plane. The only dry place is in the woods, and it's difficult to see someone there.
Pulling the boat, we would go through the mangroves on top of trees, trunks, and everything. At one point, Milton stepped on an alligator. He was even almost bitten by the alligator. When we were close to the larger part of the river at the top, we heard the plane. Then we stopped. Then they stopped. They're looking for us. On Sunday, when they went there, on the way back, the plane was very low, deviating from the normal route, knowing that possibly something had happened because we were taking too long. We should have already been at the post. The plane passed right over us. We saw it very close to us. We are here, we screamed, the plane left. Okay, off it went. We felt helpless. There was nothing we could do. You see the plane, look, here's the boat. It passed right over us. We continued the journey. We pulled the boat out. The stern was badly bent. Then we used some stones to put it into place. And then we sort of moved it and then bashed it into place. We put it back the way it was. We set up and we spent the night there. The next day, we left early in the morning. And at night, thank you very much, Lord. Tomorrow morning we'll return to our journey. We left the next day, very early in the morning, put the few things we had in the boat. Let's go. Hey, what in the world? Yesterday we worked very hard to get the engine really hot. And now nothing is happening. We forgot to pray. Lord, make that engine work, please. Yesterday it worked. Why won't it work now? Oh, there it is. All right, now it's turning on. Yeah, that's working. That's how it is in our lives, right? We get it right, but it seems like we just don't learn.
We dismantled the camp. Before taking the tarp off, we knelt down and we made a resolution that whenever and wherever we told the story, we weren't going to go out as heroes. We knelt there and prayed. In the morning, we dismantled the camp and started sailing again. And we got to the crash site, and we couldn't get through. There was no way. What do? We had to take the boat out. It took us all day to walk about 300 meters, because now we had to carry the boat, and it weighs 154 pounds. It has the engine, and we were weak. The boat is 19 feet long. You start walking and it gets stuck in the trees. You go there, turn around a little bit, come back here, because we needed to get to the other side of the branch of the river. There we could go sailing, and it was, again, a very risky situation.
We had to spend the night there again. It was a clean place with some big rocks. There was a cave inside the rocks. I said, "Wow." I didn't even need to ask him. He immediately said, "Yeah, a Jaguar's home, right?" I said, "Yeah, it looks like a Jaguar's home." Wow, we managed to get out there, and now a Jaguar will eat us. It's no use, right? God is in control. He's the one who takes care of us. So there's some things that I believe it really was a Jaguar's home. But I think the Jaguar went for a walk that day, so it was out.
Things like that are spectacular. That day, when we were pulling the boat, I stepped on the alligator. A snake passed by. A jararaca passed by our side. And when we arrived at that place, that's where the famous cave was. There was a stone cave, and there were only jaguar footprints. It was indeed a jaguar's home. What do? We have to sleep here. There's nowhere to go. I took my stick. Can you imagine? Curt took out the flashlight, which is a wisp of light, but it does the trick. We had to see if the jaguar was inside. How am I going to hit the jaguar on the head with the stick? Will it hurt? Will I be able to kill the animal before it kills us? There was no jaguar, but there were many footprints, one after another, one after another. There was a terrible rain during the night. We made the camp. We spent the night there. Again, I kept thinking, oh my goodness. If this engine doesn't work right, we'll only have one chance. If it stops working, we'll go in with the boat in this condition. It was a huge boulder with violent water. You can't imagine what will happen here. We only had one chance. At night I was praying and thinking, Lord, don't let the engine stop working. The next morning, we started the engine and we prayed out loud. Lord, you have brought us this far. The engine cannot stop. There is no time to start the engine again. Because the water was calm here, I was going into deep water, the rapids going downhill, trying to get to the other side and head the boat to continue going up. When we tried to start the engine, it didn't start. We pulled it. I'm like, Curt, hold on. We prayed again. Lord, please, this engine has to start. I pulled half of the spinneret. The engine started. I headed out at full speed. The water was going down, and deep water on this side, down to the start of the trip with that rough boulder. When I went in, the engine hit a stick. It lifted because the stick was loose. It went back into the water running without stopping. I crossed that deeper part with my heart in my mouth, and Curt, with his eyes wide open, we crossed. Past that part, the rapids were going downhill. We turned in the other corner on the other side of the river and we started sailing. And there were no more rapids. I said, Curt, it was the last place. When we were 600 meters away from finding the big river again, the rapids ended there. They literally ended there because we started sailing. The branch got wider. We got into the other branch. It was a relief because there were no more rapids. The water was running, but it was deep water. The boat was like an airplane. It went and crossed. It is made for that. And we went sailing. And then we saw the hand of God because after 1 to 2 hours sailing, we heard a noise. The plane was coming low.
It didn't take us long to find them, and it was a miracle of God. The biggest miracle, actually, was that they were able to get the engine running. They repaired the boat and got it out. Maybe if we had done the search a day earlier, we would have flown long hours and wouldn't have found them.
The plane was coming low, and then we saw it. That made us happy. We jumped on the boat.
Look at the plane! It's them! They spotted us, and they started to fly overhead.
The fear, what worried us, the radio would announce that they had found us, that we were alive. The plane flew, came back, and they started throwing the most important things in the world. A lighter, a knife, some food. They threw it so perfectly. It came down tied in a ribbon, and I took it. It was chocolate, some food, and there was a note from Timothy, my son. He wrote, "Dad, I don't know if you have radio there, but if you don't have it, know that Brazil beat Argentina 2-0 in soccer today."
Rescued on the day Brazil beat Argentina 2-0.
Many people think there's no way up or down. I don't have emotional strength anymore. I don't have physical strength. The situation is completely out of human control. God works. God continues to be God in any situation. It doesn't depend on our strength or on what we were ceasing to be, but on the grace of God, and His hand is always there. Can you imagine the injury if I had stepped on the alligator? If I had been bitten by a snake? Or Curt had been bitten by a snake? It would be a different story. If that engine cord had broken, it would be a different story. If the engine had stopped in that situation, the ending would be different. The boat was never used again. It made just one trip. It got there, and we put it on the wall, and it was never used again. The story and teachings continue that God is wonderful, and God's grace is better than life. We keep moving. I don't know how it ends, but we cling to grace until the end.
There are no words. It's the epitome of everything. That's why I'm happy. I'm more than happy. Top notch. Yeah.